You've been carrying far too much for far too long, haven't you? The harmless-sounding words that cut deeper than anyone realizes, the moments of being abandoned without explanation, the conversations you walk away from feeling like you're too sensitive, too weak, too much. And those nights when you lie awake not because of what happened today, but because of a wound you can't even trace back to its beginning. And you're tired to the point where you sometimes wish you could disappear for a few days, just so everything would stop pressing in on you. I understand. The pain isn't just in the event itself, it's in the way you keep asking, why is it always me? It's in the exhaustion of having to be strong, kind, composed, even when deep inside you're begging for someone to finally understand the hurt you've been carrying. And the cruelest part is this, you keep getting hurt, even though you've done everything you can to avoid it. But there is something important I want you to hear. Your pain doesn't exist because the world is too harsh. It exists because there are wounds inside you that have never been seen, never been held, never been healed, and every touch from the outside world accidentally strikes them again and again. This is not because you are weak, it's because you've had to be strong for far too long. And today, I want to take you on a different journey, one where, by the time we reach the end, nothing and nobody will be able to hurt you the way they once did. Not because the world will change, but because you will. Let me show you how. So before we learn how to become untouchable, we need to step into the place most people spend their whole lives avoiding. The truth about the origin of pain. Because if you don't understand it, you will keep treating the cuts on the surface while ignoring the wound that has been bleeding underneath. And it is exactly at the crossing point between these two layers, the surface and the depth, where the real path to freedom begins. The first thing you must acknowledge, no matter how difficult it feels, is this. Your pain is not just about what happened recently. It is the result of a quiet emotional history stored in your body, your mind, and your nervous system. Have you ever felt like you were overreacting, but couldn't explain why? Have you ever wondered why a harmless comment could keep you awake all night? If you have, then you are not alone. When you feel rejected, ignored, or criticized, it is not just emotion, it is a system inside you that learned to detect danger long before you had words for it. And you know what? Your pain has a reason. It has always had a reason. Psychology calls the experiences that shape this emotional reactivity adverse childhood experiences. In a large study by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States, nearly 40% of participants reported experiencing at least two forms of childhood adversity: emotional neglect, witnessing domestic violence, parental separation, or emotional abuse. Does that number surprise you? How many of these wounds might still be quietly living in you? These experiences are not just memories, they rewire your nervous system, making you more sensitive to rejection, more afraid of silence, and more exhausted in relationships where you constantly have to hold everything together. Do you feel like you've been tired for far too long? Scientific research also shows that individuals who have been through trauma often exhibit heightened activity in the hippocampus, the region of the brain responsible for memory and emotional processing, when faced with emotional triggers. What does this mean? It means new pain touches old pain, and the entire system trembles. It is not that you are weak, it is that your brain is doing exactly what it was taught to do to protect you. Think back for a moment. Has a cold text message ever made your chest tighten? Has someone's silence ever made you fear you did something terribly wrong? Has a single sentence echoed in your mind long after the other person forgot it? If the answer is yes, please don't blame yourself. You are simply living with a nervous system that has never been soothed. And perhaps the most heartbreaking truth is this. Many of us grew up without ever being taught how to process our emotions. We were only taught to suppress them, to smile through them, to endure them, to be strong. But do you know something? Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They simply wait and return with greater force. This is why even when you change jobs, change environments, change partners, or change lifestyles, pain still finds you. Because you are not being hurt by the present, you are being awakened by the past that never healed. But let's pause here for a moment, take a breath. Because here is the good news. What was formed inside can be healed from the inside. No one is born destined to stay wounded forever. Does knowing that make your chest feel a little lighter? Do you sense a new door beginning to open? And it is exactly here that we begin touching the truth that will lead us into the next part. Pain is not the enemy, it is a signal. It is trying to tell you something. It wants you to look at a part of yourself you were once afraid to face. It wants to be heard, understood, and released. Because only when you understand this signal can you begin the journey to a place where nothing and nobody can hurt you the way they once did. Stay with me, because right after this, we will step into the most important question. How do we decode the signals your pain has been trying to send you? Don't leave. This is the moment everything begins to shift. And where? With ein dot. Before you can reach the place where nothing and nobody can hurt you anymore, you and I need to do something you were likely never taught to do. Understand pain as a structure, not as a random wave of emotion that comes and goes. Pain is not chaos. Pain has order, logic, and architecture. You simply weren't handed the blueprint. And now that you have arrived at this part of the journey, I want you to prepare yourself a little differently, because what you're about to discover can change the way you see yourself forever. If you're sitting down, grab a piece of paper and a pen. If you're watching on your phone, open your Notes app. If you're watching on TV, put the remote down for a moment and use your phone to jot a few things down. If you're lying in bed, you can record your voice or mentally note the sentences that hit you the hardest. Why am I asking you to write things down? Because what you're about to hear isn't just information, it's root-level understanding. And when we touch the root, the leaves, the branches, and the trunk all begin to shift. This map will become the tool that helps you read yourself, especially in the moments your heart feels ready to collapse. Now, let's step into that map together. The map of pain always has 4 layers. Other people see only the top layer. You often think the top layer is the whole story. But the truth lies deeper, much deeper. Layer 1. The surface reaction. What you feel, but not why you feel it. This is where almost everyone stops, and that is exactly why they never escape the loop of repeated pain. This layer includes sadness, anger, hurt, fear, disappointment, heaviness, anxiety, the first wave of emotion. It arrives fast and loud, sometimes shaking your entire body. But here is the paradox. Layer 1 contains the most sensation, but the least truth. It's only the alarm bell of your nervous system. It doesn't explain the cause. It doesn't reveal the wound. It doesn't tell you where the impact actually landed. It's like seeing a bruise on your skin. You see the color, you feel the ache, but you don't know where the hit came from or how deep the injury actually goes. So if you've ever blamed yourself for overreacting or asked, why does this hurt me so much? I want you to hear this clearly. You're not reacting to the present moment. You're reacting to what the present moment awakens. Layer 2, the survival response, the fear that was programmed into your body. Here, pain begins to take shape. This is where emotion becomes instinct. Humans do not fear events. Humans fear the meaning their brain assigns to events. A cold message triggers the fear of abandonment. A criticism triggers the fear of inadequacy. An argument triggers the fear of being devalued. Silence triggers the fear of being invisible. And what hurts the most is this. Most of these fears were not created by the people in your life today. They were programmed long before you were old enough to understand what was happening. Have you ever felt your chest tighten from a harmless comment? Have you ever spiraled because someone simply needed space? Have you ever shocked yourself with how intensely you reacted? It's not because you're too emotional. It's because your survival system has been sounding the alarm for years without anyone guiding you through it. Layer 2 is the voice of the past, not the present. Layer 3. The unconscious story where you interpret your life without knowing it. If layer 2 is where the fears live, layer 3 is where meaning is created. People do not suffer from reality. People suffer from the story they attach to reality. He didn't reply, he must be losing interest. They criticized me, I must not be good enough. They're distant, I must have done something wrong. These stories are not harmless. They become the lens through which you interpret the world. Someone acts for 5 seconds, but you live inside the story you built for days. And where do these stories come from? From the years you spent being compared, from the times you learned love was conditional, from the moments your voice was ignored, from childhood experiences where you learned visibility had a price. These stories didn't disappear. They became your automatic scripts, activated whenever someone touches the bruise you never tended to. The world isn't hurting you. It's the story, the unconscious interpretation that does the damage. Layer 4, the core wound, the deepest belief you ever formed about yourself. This is where pain becomes a silent home, one you don't realize you've been living in. The core wound isn't an emotion. It isn't a memory. It isn't another person. The core wound is a belief, a painful conclusion you drew long before you understood its consequences. I am not enough. Love must be earned. If I'm not perfect, I'll be abandoned. My feelings are a burden. I am safest when I please others. And when this belief exists, you do not need anyone to hurt you. You hurt yourself through it every day. This explains why you kept choosing the same kind of people. The core wound pulls you into familiar patterns, not because you are foolish, but because the brain searches for what it recognizes, even when it's painful. When someone hits your weak spot, you don't hurt because they are powerful. You hurt because the wound is still open. When you see these 4 layers, you begin to change. You stop reacting blindly. You stop assuming others have control over your emotions. You stop believing the world is against you. You begin to see. No one is truly hurting you. They are awakening what was already hurting inside. And once you see this, the wound loses its authority over your life. You step out of the identity of the hurt one and into the identity of the observer, a place where clarity begins, a place where strength is born. Now that you have the map, now that you see the 4-layer structure of pain, now that you understand why a small action from someone can shake your entire nervous system, the next question is no longer, why am I hurting, but how do I stop being carried away by these emotional waves? The answer lies in something that sounds simple, yet represents one of the greatest turning points in emotional maturity. You do not control your emotions by suppressing them. You control them by becoming conscious of them. And here is the most common mistake people make. They try to turn off their feelings instead of seeing their feelings. They try to become stronger by becoming numb without realizing that numbness is not strength. Numbness is an old survival strategy, a fragile shell that shatters the moment someone presses the right bruise. So this part is not about stop feeling pain. It's masked. This is about leading your inner world, like someone who is emotionally grown, without panic, without running away, without self-blame, and without handing your power to others. To do that, you must move through 3 stages, each one lifting you closer to the state where nothing and nobody can hurt you the way they once did. Stage 1. Immediate awareness. Stop merging yourself with your emotions. Most people are not hurt by others. They are hurt by their unconscious fusion between self and emotion. When you think, he ignored me, I must be unlovable. They criticized me, I must be worthless. They're silent, I must have done something wrong. You are not just feeling pain, you are becoming the pain. You push yourself into the role of the wounded one, even when the other person may not have intended anything harmful. So the very first step in reclaiming emotional control is not to fix others, but to separate yourself from the fire burning inside. This is my emotion, but it is not me. That sentence works like a hand reaching into the storm and pulling you out of the flood. It creates space between you and your reaction. And within that space, choice becomes possible. For example, when someone ignores you, instead of reacting, ask, Which layer of pain is being activated right now? When someone makes you feel inadequate, pause and ask, is this the truth, or is this an old unconscious story? The moment you observe instead of react, you step out of autopilot. That moment is the beginning of freedom. Stage 2. Inner dialogue, taking back the narrative of your mind. Humans do not suffer from events. We suffer from the meaning we attach to those events. Thus, the second stage of emotional control is about actively conversing with yourself instead of allowing old narratives to drag you into darkness. When a strong emotion appears, ask yourself, what story am I telling myself right now? Does this story come from the present or from a much earlier time? If I looked at this situation from a neutral perspective, would it still feel threatening? You may be surprised to learn that nearly 80% of your emotional pain does not come from other people, but from the harsh, automatic conclusions you've been making without ever questioning them. Examples. His silence is not proof that you are unworthy. He may be tired, overwhelmed, or simply lacking communication skills. Their criticism is not an attack. It might reflect their own stress, their upbringing, or their inability to express kindness. A rejection is not a verdict on your value. It is merely incompatibility. When you change the story, you change the emotion. When you change the emotion, you change the reaction. When you change the reaction, you reclaim control. This is the breaking point of the old ego, where you stop living as a bundle of instincts and begin living as a conscious being. Stage 3. Re-establishing boundaries, protecting yourself without armor. One of the clearest signs that you have regained emotional control is this. You begin setting boundaries based on your needs, not on your fear. You do not create boundaries to punish others, to prove strength, or to show superiority. You create boundaries because you know where your wounds are, you know who can step on them, and you know how to protect yourself not with armor, but with clarity. A true boundary is not, don't treat me like that. A true boundary is, if that happens, I will choose the response that protects my well-being. Boundaries do not control other people. They control how you respond to their choices. And when your boundaries become clear, something extraordinary happens. Toxic people naturally drift away. Healthy people instinctively adjust to you. Exhausting relationships become lighter. And most importantly, you begin to feel safe inside yourself. A boundary is never a wall. It is a door with a lock, and you hold the key. Once you complete these 3 stages, a new truth emerges. Other people no longer have the power to hurt you. Not because they suddenly became kinder, not because life magically changed, but because you see everything clearly, without the distortion of old wounds. You no longer interpret every action as an attack. You no longer use others' emotions to measure your worth. You no longer chase, beg, over-explain, or fight for love from people who never learned how to give it. You become your own anchor. You become your own safe place. And from that moment on, no one can touch you in the way that used to break you, because a wound that has been seen loses its power. You've learned to see pain through its 4 layers. You've learned how to separate yourself from your emotions, how to dialogue with your inner world, and how to set boundaries that actually protect you. But to reach the point where nothing and nobody can hurt you the way they once did, understanding alone is not enough. You must cultivate a form of emotional resilience, a strength not meant for surviving a single storm, but for standing through entire seasons of turbulence. This resilience is not coldness. It isn't emotional numbness. It isn't the ability to not need anyone. True strength is the capacity to remain with yourself, even when the world around you is shaking. It is standing in the storm while knowing, I don't have to collapse. I have a place to return to myself. To do ATN, and to build that foundation, we must move through 3 pillars, the spine of an inner life that is steady, grounded, and unbreakable. Pillar 1, presence, silencing the internal noise. What hurts you is not only what happened, but the mental storm that follows. The assumptions, the fears, the old memories rushing back, the nervous system believing it must defend you even when there is no real threat. You are swept away not by the moment itself, but by the 100 imagined scenarios that come after it. Presence is the ability to press pause, to pull yourself back from the past and the future into the only place you can truly breathe, this moment. You'll recognize this pattern. You worry about things that haven't happened. You suffer because of things long gone. You judge yourself through situations you don't fully understand. And in all of this, you are not living in the present. You are living in the elsewhere, created by your mind. Presence is the anchor that pulls you back into your body. Is this moment actually dangerous? Or is an old fear trying to speak again? The more present you are, the weaker the pain becomes. Because pain cannot survive in the light of awareness. It thrives in confusion and fear. A person who can return to the present moment becomes hard to hurt because they see the world as it is, not as their wounds interpret it. And that is where emotional stability begins. Pillar 2. Self-regulation, stopping the past from driving the present. Self-regulation is not suppression. It is the ability to soothe yourself before you react. This skill is essential for anyone with a sensitive nervous system or a history of emotional wounds. When you are triggered, your brain believes danger is coming, even if all that happened was a delayed reply or a tone of voice that felt off. Self-regulation is how you tell your nervous system, "You're safe, breathe, I'm here with you." And something extraordinary happens when safety is restored. When the body calms, the mind becomes clear. When the mind is clear, the heart becomes steady. And when the heart is steady, no one can shake you. Here are simple but powerful methods of self-regulation. Deep breathing in a 4-6 rhythm, placing your hand on your chest and whispering, "I'm here with myself." Moving your body to release stored tension. Stepping away from the situation instead of reacting immediately. These may seem small, but they are the difference between someone controlled by emotion and someone in control of their emotional life. Every form of lasting strength begins with self-regulation. Pillar 3. Emotional identity. Knowing who you are without the pain. Most emotional suffering comes from one simple truth. People do not truly know who they are outside of their past wounds. Without emotional identity, you become vulnerable to other people's words, their silence, their rejection, their expectations and projections. But developing emotional identity means answering powerful questions. What do I want? What do I tolerate? What do I refuse? Who am I when I'm not trying to please or perform for anyone? This is not a mental exercise. This is the foundation for how you show up in relationships, work, family, and life's most difficult moments. When you have emotional identity, other people lose their ability to define you. Your worth is no longer tied to someone's mood, approval, or attention, and the most liberating truth emerges. When you know who you are, you no longer need anyone to confirm it. When these 3 pillars unite, you become someone pain cannot touch, not because you feel nothing, not because you avoid love or vulnerability, not because you never make mistakes, but because you have an inner foundation. You have inner leadership. You have a core that is stronger than the noise around you. The storm may come, but it doesn't take you with it, because you are no longer reacting from instinct, you are responding from awareness. This is emotional resilience, the ability to stay with yourself, even when everything else is falling apart. And from that place, no one can hurt you the way they once did. The wound has been seen, and what is seen loses its power. And once you have built that foundation solid enough for you to stay upright, even when old memories resurface, or when someone accidentally presses on your deepest wound, it's time to enter another dimension, a place where pain doesn't disappear, but it no longer leads you. If you're ready to go one step further, we will step into the art of becoming untouchable by emotional manipulation. Emotional immunity is not the state of feeling no sadness, no disappointment, or no hurt. Emotional immunity is when your emotions no longer drag you like a small boat in a storm, because you have become the ocean vast enough to hold every wave, yet unshakable beneath them. It is not feeling nothing, but feeling without being taken. It is the ability to stand before the person who once hurt you, and still breathe evenly. The ability to hear a difficult sentence without something exploding inside you. The ability to let emotions move through you, without handing them the wheel of your life. To reach this state, you must understand 3 principles most people never discover in their lifetime. Miss even one, and emotions will continue to ambush you no matter how much you grow. Principle 1. Every emotion is information, not a command. Most people live believing that emotions equals truth. Sadness equals something is wrong. Fear equals danger is real. Anger equals someone is guilty. Hurt equals I am not enough. But emotionally immune people understand. Emotions are not orders to obey. They are signals of something stirring inside you. You feel abandoned, not because they abandoned you, but because an old wound was touched. You feel insulted not because they destroyed your worth, but because your self-respect needs reinforcement. You feel inadequate, not because you're lacking, but because your emotional identity is still forming. When you treat emotions as information, you stop reacting instantly. You observe, decode, and choose how to respond. You become the conductor of your inner orchestra, not the instrument being played. Principle 2. The power to delay your reaction is the power to own your life. This is the superpower of emotional immunity. Do not react immediately. Not silence as punishment. Not silence to appear strong, but silence to see clearly what is happening inside you. Here's a truth that may surprise you. 90% of what you want to say in the moment comes from the wound, not wisdom. 80% of decisions made during emotional activation become tomorrow's regret. 100% of destructive arguments happen because 2 nervous systems are colliding, not 2 hearts communicating. Emotional immunity isn't, I'm not hurt anymore. It begins with, I'm hurt, but I won't respond yet. I'm angry, but this is not the time to reply. Tensions a pause life. I feel pain, but I will examine which layer it belongs to. The moment you delay your reaction, you reclaim power. The person who reacts fastest is the one being controlled. The person who chooses when to react is untouchable. Principle 3. Disidentifying from emotion, the shield against all attacks. When you think, he's silent, I must not be good enough. They left, I must be unworthy. They're upset, I must be the problem. It's ordered. You are fusing your identity with the emotional signal. You are turning a momentary physiological response into a conclusion about your worth. Emotionally immune people carry a quiet mantra. This is my emotion, but it is not me. And suddenly, the arrows from others hit you lightly, touch you but do not cut through. Not because you no longer feel, but because you stop interpreting everything as a judgment of your value. Emotional immunity begins when you stop letting the behavior of others define you. They may be careless, but you no longer believe you deserved it. They may be distant, but you no longer call yourself invisible. They may walk away, but you no longer collapse. You see everything clearer, calmer, truer. What emotional immunity looks like in real life. When someone goes silent, you don't spiral. When someone is upset, you don't assume it's your fault. When someone leaves, you don't lose yourself. When someone pushes expectations on you, you know your limit. When emotion rises, you don't get swallowed by it. You don't become stone. You become the ocean, deep, wide, peaceful and unshakable. You feel everything, but nothing breaks you. The final secret of emotional immunity. Emotional immunity isn't a destination. It is an inner capacity, strengthened through every moment of awareness, every pause, every breath, every choice not to be pulled by the old story. You don't become emotionally immune by toughening up. You become immune by understanding yourself, observing instead of reacting, soothing instead of attacking, stepping out of old narratives, seeing the world through clarity, not fear. It is not a wall, it is light. the kind of light that emotional attacks can no longer pierce. You become untouchable, not because you're cold, but because you're free. There comes a moment in every healing journey when you realize something essential. True transformation is not the moment you stop feeling emotions. It is the moment emotions no longer have the power to pull you back into your old identity. And when you reach that threshold, when the wounds that once shattered you now appear only as quiet points of awareness, that is the first breath of rebirth. Not dramatic, not loud, but subtle and profound, like a seed breaking open beneath the soil after a long frozen winter. Rebirth begins the moment you recognize that the old self you spent years trying to protect, the self, afraid of abandonment, afraid of comparison, afraid of disappointing others, was never your true identity. It was a survival mechanism built out of countless moments of helplessness in your past. It kept you alive then, but it cannot help you grow now. And as you observe yourself with a new, grounded clarity, you understand that you no longer need that armor. The old self does not die. It is simply set down so you can step into a different level of life, one where your identity is no longer constructed from fear. Rebirth deepens when your reactions begin to change. Your old self used to chase after someone who walked away, blame itself when someone went silent, panic when emotions rose, or desperately try to fix relationships that were clearly no longer aligned. But your new self moves differently. You observe before reacting, you step back before being pulled in, and you breathe before concluding that it must be my fault. Not because you feel less, but because you see more. You realize that many of the emotions that once overwhelmed you were not responses to the present, they were echoes of old stories you no longer want to carry. Another sign of rebirth is when you start giving yourself what you once begged others for. Instead of waiting to be reassured, you soothe yourself. Instead of waiting to be chosen, you choose yourself daily. Instead of longing for someone to witness your pain, you place your hand over your heart and whisper, "I see you, I'm here." And in that moment, when you become your own companion, emotional dependency dissolves quietly, almost imperceptibly. Rebirth also reveals itself when the past loses its power to dictate your future. A criticism that once kept you awake now moves through you like a passing breeze. A silence that once crushed your chest now becomes space for reflection. You begin to see clearly that most of people's reactions have nothing to do with you, they simply reflect their own inner world. And when you stop assigning meaning to everything, nothing can wound you deeply the way it once did. But the most beautiful part of rebirth is the peace you no longer have to fight to maintain. Peace does not come because life becomes easier. Peace comes because the architecture within you has changed. You are calm not because there are no storms, but because you have become the ocean. You are strong not because you no longer feel pain, but because you understand where it comes from and how to let it move through you instead of trapping it inside. You are free not because someone protects you, but because you no longer put yourself in the position of needing to be protected. And the true meaning of this journey is not that nothing and nobody will ever hurt you again, but this: pain no longer has the power to pull you back into the fragile version of who you used to be. You will still feel, but you will not collapse. You will still be moved, but you will not break. Your inner structure has changed, and because of that, nothing can make you lose yourself anymore. One day, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, you will suddenly realize that life has taken on a different shade. Not because everything has become easier, but because you have become someone else. The things that once kept you awake at night no longer tighten your chest. The people who once held emotional power over you have become nothing more than silhouettes passing through your story. You no longer try to predict what others think, nor punish yourself for things you cannot control. You've stepped out of the battlefield you didn't even know you were trapped in. Your new freedom is quiet. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need validation. It exists in the softness of each steady breath. In every moment you choose calm over reaction. In the times you walk forward without letting old voices pull you backward. And then you realize, the thing you searched for all along wasn't a life without pain. It was a version of yourself who could move through pain without losing your sense of self. That is freedom. A kind of freedom no one can take from you, because it rises from within. And when you look back, you will see that this path was never easy, but it was always worth it. You are no longer the person who began this journey. You have crossed into a new chapter, one where you can live, breathe, and exist as yourself, whole, awake, and unshakable. This is your new freedom,